Hey folks, DMs out there, it's time for us to live up to all those evil accolades that our players give us. And in this episode of Dragons and Dice, it's all about sneaky monsters to harrow your party with. But don't worry, if you're on the other side of that DM screen, for all you players out there, I have tips and tricks to finding each of these sneaky monsters to break your DM's heart. Let's check them out. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. We're going to kick it off with animated objects. These are great because normal perception checks won't notice that they're magical if they aren't actively moving. And that's how we're going to use these to get that awesome surprise round against the party. These can be suits of armor in a castle. Think Harry Potter, when the castle comes alive to fight Voldemort. Or mundane objects like rugs and brooms, all of which now have stat blocks in the monster manual, which is awesome. And I also like to add even a smaller, more mundane object for this too, and use them like a minion. Like they have 1 hit point and they die at any hit, but they work like a baby magic missile and they do 1d4 -1. And that can be any object that is just animated to fly at someone whenever the trigger's set off. I really like using like bookshelves where all the books come to life and then boom, 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 the trigger goes off. They fly out and hit the party. You get a nice little surprise round and then you get to go. These work really well in a wizard's tower or a dungeon, anywhere that there's going to be a lot of magic as a nice little magical trap to throw at your party. That's a little bit harder for them to find. Now for the player's cheat sheet on this one. If you have the spell slots or the time, you can ritually cast Detect Magic and it lights these up like a candle. And if you don't have this, you can always, throw a rock into a room and see if it triggers something off of movement. That may not be exactly what the trigger is. That depends on how your DM is going to run that. But Detect Magic gives these away really easily. And one thing on the DM side, if someone casts Detect Magic, you should probably let them do an Arcana roll or an investigation check to see if they can figure out what the trigger is, to see if they can disarm it, or give them the upper hand and let them get the surprise attack. Next monster on the list, we have cloakers. And these things can be really terrifying. They are super camoed and very dangerous. They normally work alone, but you can have a few grouped together in a place that has some nice areas for them to hide. Cave ceilings, dungeon walls, anywhere that's dark, they have modeled hides and they blend in with their surroundings. So as the DM, feel free to set a really high perception check for the party to find these. Something like DC 25 is what I would go with. And these are native to the Underdark. And if it's your party's first time there, or they can't produce a good way to prove why they would be looking for these or know what they were and would have in-game knowledge of these baddies, then have them make that roll with disadvantage, which I think is something that DMs should do a little more often, because just because you perceive things doesn't mean that you know what they are. You might, I see everything, but I've never been here and I don't know that there are monsters that are going to drop off the ceiling, wrap around my head and try to suffocate and blind me. If you don't know about these things, it's hard to be looking for those things. And I think that's something that should kind of be added into D&D games, is to make the perception checks a little bit tougher. I mean, let's face it, any druid or rogue is going to pass almost every perception check they get after a few levels. This is a way to kind of up that and keep the excitement of the dungeon crawl going, because you don't always know everything that's lurking there for you. Player cheat sheet for these baddies. If you're crawling in a dungeon in the Underdark, these are ambush predators, and so let a familiar or a summon go out in front of you. But beware, these are intelligent, so if there's a mouse walking 10 feet in front of a wizard, it's going to wait and jump on the wizard. It's not going to just hit the first thing that moves. So give them some space to trigger their surprise attacks. Also, familiar scouting a dungeon is just always a good way to go about. So, player cheat sheet, there you go. Next group of sneaky baddies, we're going to go with Dark Mantles, Piercers, and Ropers. And these three all work well together, and they can be found in the same area as the last one, in the Underdark. And player cheat sheet, stay out of the Underdark, it's dangerous. But I put these three together because they use the same tactic in hunting and work well for what you will need for your CR to hit the party with. Ropers are a bit bigger. They're CR5s. The Piercer and Dark Mantles are CR 1/2, so pretty good size difference there. And Piercers are actually the larval stage of Ropers, so a little bit of D&D lore there for you go. A good way to use these would be have some Piercers early in the dungeon and then maybe some Ropers later. They're very similar to Cloakers in that they set perfectly still and they drop down on unsuspecting victims. As the DM, you run these just like Cloakers, except that these don't have intelligence, so they'll probably hit the first thing that moves because they're just like triggered ambush predators. But if you are feeling especially evil as a DM, the Ropers do have long tentacles, and you can have these intertwined with vines hanging down from like a cave ceiling of the roof. And then when the party walks through, snap, they get grappled up and pulled toward the roper, and then you get to roll for initiative. So fun way to use those to kind of giggity grab one of your players in a sneaky way. Player cheat sheet for this, same as Cloakers, these are ambush predators, so you can use pets to trigger them or familiars, whatever you have that can go forward in front of you. And if you're really worried, you can always swing a pole at the vines, as these baddies are not that intelligent, and they're going to react to whatever hits them. I love this next one because it's a way of using some sneaky monsters while you're still in a city. And this one's going to be doppelgangers. And these can be fun ways of betraying parties. Make one of these shapeshifters an NPC that will give out a quest, join the party a bit, and then dang your inevitable but untimely betrayal. That's double points if you get that Wash reference. And if you don't, go watch Firefly. You'll thank me later. But these are a great way to pull one over on the party, and they work extremely well in towns. You can have that shifter play multiple roles in the town until you get the party out where they need to be, and then at the opportune moment, you can have them betray the party, and you find out that they work for some other nefarious entity or the BBEG of your campaign. And it's just a really fun way to get to use your monsters to interact with your party as you're going through it. Player cheat sheet for this. Hey DM, I want to insight check that dude or dudette. But be warned that these doppelgangers do have good deception check stats. And as the DM, I would like to roll my deception checks for these type characters in my campaign beforehand, so the party doesn't see me pull out dice and drop them in the tower and they're like, oh no, they're 100% on the up and up. This is a way of keeping it, a little bit of the confusion on whether or not this is a good guy or a bad guy, because you just get to tell them what the actual result of the roll was without making it in front of them. Because no matter how good your players are at separating in-game knowledge with metagame knowledge, they can't help but not trust that guy if they see you roll a deception check against their insight check. So that's just a little thing I do to keep like the game a little more enticing and a little more like on pins and needles, whether or not this is a good person or not. Now for one that's not evil, but so cute that it's painful, and that's going to be fairy dragons. And these can be really fun to use as a DM because they get illusion magic and greater invisibility. And with the new monster manual, we have two of these to pick from now. You've got an adult version and a youth version. And the adults actually get polymorph and hallucinatory terrain, which is also fun to play around with. And the best part about these guys is they're good guys or girls, but they are pranksters. But they are the type of pranksters that lead people into helping others. And so fun ways to use these is you can have them like pester the party during a long rest, and they won't let you sleep until you like get up and follow them into something that they want you to see or something that they need you to find, so that you'll kind of right this wrong or help people. It's just like a fun like way for the DM to get to pull some shenanigans on their party members. You can do goofy stuff where each person wakes up and they've only got 2 right shoes or 2 left, and the party has to figure out who's got what, or certain things can be missing and they have to search the area to find it. Or if you've got a bard in the party, you can mess with their instrument and it only plays songs that are out of tune, or it plays a different song than what they're playing. These are just really fun prankster monsters to play as a DM because you get to do so much shenanigans with your party, and it's always during like a long rest and out of combat type things. And you can use it to kind of like get the party a little bit back on track. And maybe if someone's, really charismatic and sweet talks them, they can have a little pet fairy dragon youth riding around with them. Who knows? Player cheat sheet for these, it kind of goes self-explanatory. There's nothing you need to do. These aren't bad guys. So just play along, have fun, and don't kill them. And DMs, if they attack a fairy dragon, you have my full permission to homebrew an elder worm fairy dragon that has mass true polymorph, turn the whole party into newts, and then eat them. Next one is a little bit of a stretch, but if you pull it off, they work really great. And this is going to be Flaming Skulls, but with a little bit of a twist. They've been used like lighting in a dungeon. And as DM, be fair with your description of this. Tell them that all the wall sconces look like skulls burning with fire that lights the room with an eerie green flame glow or whatever. This works really nice if you're using it in a wizard tower or a necromancer's area, as it kind of adds good flavor to the descriptions you get to give out and might throw your players off a little bit. And then set a high perception check to see if they aren't just skull-shaped sconces, but deadly fire-breathing skulls. And these are fun for the DM since they have a very high intelligence. You can wait at just the right time to say the most awesome DM words ever. I cast Fireball. And then you get to follow that right up with the next best. Roll for initiative. Player cheat sheets. These baddies are very magical. Detect magic will find them. Or if you're feeling extra paranoid, you can just smash every light you see along the way and tell that human in your party to suck it. They should have got dark vision to start with. Now it's time for a classic, and that's going to be the good old gelatinous cube. We all love them, and most DMs probably have used them. And one of the things I like to do with these is like to set them in a small room where everything looks like it's settled into a set of decay. Reason being that the cube is slowly digesting it. But I have that cube fill the entire room. Then someone walks in, boom, you got pseudopoded, my friend. The other way I like to use these, and this one's a little more niche, is I like to put a floating skeleton in one of these and have it about 3 feet off the ground. And I normally add a cape to this as it just adds to the flavor of a levitated skeletal mage. But in reality, it's just a skeleton that's already dead in a gelatinous cube. And then when you have the skeleton in the middle of it to the back side of the gelatinous cube, and that person runs up and tries to smack it, they're engulfed now and there. And if they decide to shoot that skeleton with magic or ranged, I make nice sound effects like, as it hits the gelatinous cube, and describe that the arrow or the firebolt seem to dissipate just before it hits the skeleton. And it adds a little bit of, what's going on here? And these come in, all kinds of different sizes and shapes. You can use whatever monster you want to put in it if you want to do that little sneaky trick. But it's a really fun little one-off thing. It's not something you can pull off more than once against your party, as, they'll be on the lookout for it after that. But the first time, it's a really fun encounter. Gelatinous cubes do come with a pretty low DC for 15 perception check built into their stat block. So not too hard for people to find them, but if you catch them not looking, they're always fun to have in a dungeon. Player cheat sheets. These can be, like I said, not that hard to find, but you can always poke stuff with a pole and, if it gets grabbed out of your hand and started to dissolve, it was most likely a gelatinous cube. Next up on the list is Invisible Stalkers. And just as the name implies, they're always invisible. You can't ever shut it off. It's just their nature. And they have pretty good CR for you to work with as DM. They are CR 6, and they normally work as assassins for powerful magic users. So it's pretty easy to fit that into a campaign. And they make a really good culprit if you're trying to have a murder mystery in a town and the party has to try to solve why no one's able to witness things. They work really well as a whodunit monster. The other thing that I enjoy with these is they can serve as nice minions to back up a big baddie if you have a boss fight coming up. Put them on the initiative board, but don't tell the party where they're at. And then when their turn comes up, you have an invisible helper there with that archmage or lich or whatever that is now attacking the party that they didn't know about to start with. And it's a really good way to just throw a wrinkle into a fight. They even come with like a nice vortex ability that can let you grapple someone that's in their space. It's a bit low on the escape DC, but it's still a real sneaky option of you're in the middle of a boss fight and then, oh wait, something grabs you that you don't even know is there. Player cheat sheet for these. The easiest is see invisibility spell if you can cast it or have an item on it. Other options are you can try to guess with some AoE spells and it'll hit them if they're in the area. And when you do find out where they're at, drop fairy fire on it. Like I said, they'll stay invisible because they always are, but it should still outline them in that iridescent glow of whatever color you pick. And then you'll be able to attack them as you need to with advantage. And now, the most iconic of all the sneaky D&D monsters. That's right, you guessed it. It's not a treasure chest, it's a mimic. And these can literally be anything that's medium or smaller. Add one to the first dungeon in your campaign, and then you can spend the rest of your time watching your party poke everything with a 10-foot pole. Player cheat sheet. Poke everything with a 10-foot pole. It's most likely a mimic. I like to imagine a group of 4 people walking around. They all look like they're blind people with long poles out in front of them as they go through the dungeon. But all jokes aside, these are really fun. They can be, a book, a bed, anything you want them to be. And it's a fun way to, like I said, grab up one of your party members. I do caution against using too many because it will make your party paranoid. And on the player side, like I said, poke everything with a pole. It's an easy way to find out if it's a mimic or not. And 2, don't be too paranoid. They're only CR2 monsters. After you're level 2 or 3, you'll be able to stroll right through them, even if you get grabbed up. But it is one of the D&D classics, and I think most DMs should throw one in a game just because, who doesn't love a good mimic? Last up on my list of sneaky monsters will be the Will-O-Wisp. And these are just little floating balls of light, but they come with some really nice things for you to use as a DM. They have really good movement speed, 50-foot fly speed. They can also turn invisible as a bonus action, which is a very nice little tool. And they're a really nice way for you to lead the party into a trap or to try to get them to go into a dangerous area. You can have these pop up in a group, like the parties at a camp around a long rest, and then they see flashing lights in the woods or however you want to play it. Then, if you get the party's attention and you get them in tow, you can lead them into dangerous areas or traps or whatever nefarious deeds you have in mind as the DM. And if you're feeling really evil, you can have these whisper. Get it? Whisper to the party. I know, somewhere my wife is rolling her eyes. It's terrible. My terrible cheese. But you can have them talk to the party and see if you can get them to convince them to, head off in a direction or, call for help or whatever you want to do that leads the party off on this wild goose chase. And if you're the party members for this, your cheat sheet for this, best way to do this would be to use Detect Evil and Good. It'll tell you that these are considered undead. And almost all undead in D&D are not on your side if you're living. So that's something to keep in mind. Or if you're feeling adventurous, just follow them. See what they have to lead you to and see what traps the DM set in your way. Might be a really fun and interesting way to, play the night out. All right, time for my closing thoughts. These are some really sneaky and fun and iconic D&D monsters. I like to mix in stuff like this into my games as it's a good time when you get to grab people up, and it's a fun time for the players when they overcome it, or even better if they sniff it out beforehand. I guard against doing too much of this. It definitely falls into the less is more side of DMing. It's important to, in the game, and to use enough of these sneaky baddies to keep your players on their toes when they go dungeon crawling. But at the same time, you shouldn't have every room with a mimic or a gelatinous cube in it. A little bit of trickery is awesome and fun. It builds tension in the dungeon, but a lot of it gets really redundant and takes away from the experience of the game. No one wants to spend their D&D session just poking stuff with a stick. It can get old if that's the case. So my advice is add enough of these in to keep your party on the toes, maybe one every 4 to 5 sessions, but not so many that it stifles the pace of play. You're running the table, you'll know what your players will do and how they'll react, and you can adjust that accordingly. Player cheat sheet for closing statements for you all. Don't become too paranoid about running through a dungeon. If you get ganked up, it's not the end of the world. Here's a secret from a DM. We aren't really trying to kill you, no matter how much we joke about it. Well, maybe some of us are, but most of us aren't. Because if there aren't players, there aren't games, and we need each other to tell the stories that we're trying to create. The joy of DMing is the creative stuff you get to make, but that loses some of its fun if you never get to try it out in the game. And the joy of playing is the excitement of the unknown and getting to work through the campaign and overcome things together. I mean, smashing heads is great too, and you get what I mean though. And it's okay to just get caught in a trap sometimes. Trust your DMs. And if you die, that was your own fault. You forgot the first rule of D&D. Never trust your DM. All jokes aside, go with it, find the traps and the monsters you can, and if you don't, enjoy the excitement of getting out of it once you get caught. It's fun from both sides, DMs and players. Just go with the flow of it and enjoy the night together. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. Thanks for tuning in and spending your time listening to me go on about my favorite TTRPG, Dungeons and Dragons. And like always, anytime you could leave a review, a follow, or a like wherever you get your podcast, it'd be greatly appreciated as it helps with the exposure of a new show. We're also now on Instagram. You can check us out in the link below. And until next time, may your DMs be kind, may your D20s roll high. Bye.